I'm just getting started on the pork here. I wanted to just show you that I use pork shoulder to make my pork green chili. And I don't want you to freak out about all the fat. And that's why I didn't cut it up beforehand, because I wanted you to see how much fat is on the pork shoulder. And that's important because it makes the meat very moist, right? Pork shoulder is one of those cuts of meat that is tough, right? It's not pork loin, it's not tender, it's not going to melt in your mouth. And so it's very tough, and so we need to do a long cooking method on it. So we need to braise it. And the fat is what helps give it flavor and keep it moist. And you don't really have to worry about fat necessarily in cooking, because fat is a huge flavoring agent, right, in cooking, but it also floats to the top. So it's not like if you use all this pork and you get all that fat into your pork green chili that it's in there. You're gonna skim off all of that fat after it's done cooking and it's done its job. It's moisturized the meat, it's given us flavor, and now it's ready to be skimmed off so that you have a nice clean surface.
An alternate to the shoulder chop, you know, because a lot of times I get what's on sale.
Any sort of, you know, pork leg, pork shoulder, anything that you see in the case that looks really well marbled. Something that's not on the recipe that I normally do. When you get your pork cut up like this, I like to make a little slurry of spices. So maybe I would use some of these same spices, and I would use oregano and chili powder, maybe some ground coriander, and I would mix it with olive oil, and then I would rub that all on these cubes, and I would put it in a Ziploc bag and I would let it sit overnight. So that's good foundation of flavor. That's always something that you should probably do. And then in addition to that, once you pull that out, you still make a nice mixture of seasoned flour. Okay, now the reason that we're using seasoned flour here is because A, we want the flour to help thicken our green chili, right? And B, we want to coat the meat so that it gets nice and brown on the outside. I am making my little spice mixture now of flour, oregano. I put some chili powder in there. I don't know that that's on there, but you can make this spice mixture with anything that you like. And then I take the cubes and I put them in the flour, and I try and keep one hand. Try to do this. Keep one hand dry and one hand wet. It just is better. And you just want to lightly coat it, and then take off most of the flour, and you want to do a nice even layer in this nice hot pan. So you should hear it sizzle when you put it in. Two things you don't want to do. One, you don't want to crowd the pan, because you don't want the because you want the meat to be able to brown, you don't want it to steam. And then the other thing is you don't want to let the pork cubes sit in the flour, because then they get gummy, right? And they just absorb all that flour. So if we have to do it in batches, which generally you do, just go ahead and do one batch, get it nice and brown, turn the cubes over. I just turn them over once, I don't do it on all four sides. And then do the rest of the cubes, and we'll usually what I do is I actually cook this in a crock pot. Yeah. And Kevin is always joking with me about, you're a chef, you can't use a crock pot. Like, he just thinks that's, not, you're a chef, you can't use a crock pot. But crock pots are back in vogue, for one, so I'm hip. But for two, they do a great job with things like this. And I let it go overnight, just on low for 8 hours, and it's just a plug-in. I don't have the stove going, I don't have the oven on for 4, 5, 6 hours. I think it's much more efficient with energy and everything. What I do is I make my cubes, I just put them right into my crock pot bowl and do my other batch, and then you'll see we make the sauce. Could you do it with ground beef? Yes. So you could do it with ground beef. The thing with ground beef or anything ground is that you don't really need to braise it for as long. So you want the flavors to develop. So maybe I would cook it for maybe an hour and a half. I mean, there's really no need as far as tenderizing the meat to cook it any longer. But you do want the meat to be able to meld with all of the flavors. You would be doing the same thing. You would put your ground beef in. You wouldn't pile it up. You know, you do a nice even layer, get it nice and caramelized, because that caramelization is going to give you sort of your foundational flavor and allow you to build on it. Okay? What I'll do is after I finish sauteing all of these cubes, we add onions and peppers and spices, and then I add tomato product and chicken broth. Right, and then I just make sure there's enough, you know, certainly enough to cover, maybe by 2 inches, all of the meat, and then I just let it sit overnight in the crock pot and cook. I'm going to take out a little bit of this fat because I have too much in here.